All right. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. We have almost 100 of you signed up. We know that not everyone's going to get to make it, but we're going to give just a few minutes before we get started. So hang tight and we'll be right with you. All right, everyone. We're just going to let people trickle in as they come in, but I am so grateful you are here. Welcome. My name is Ashley. I'm one of the founders of howtodrinkwine.com, and one of my partners, Matt, is here as well. Would you like to say hi, Matt?
Hey everybody.
So Matt's going to be monitoring the chat for us. So if you have any questions, he's going to let us know as we go through. Also, our other partner, Ali, should be hopping on any minute as well. Now, we love doing these webinars because it gives us the opportunity to connect with new students. And in all honesty, we're going to talk about a lot of the courses that we have available. We are going to do a 10-week live Certified Sommelier Prep course. We've got a lot of on-demand courses coming in, as well as one-on-one coaching sessions. And all of those are really great to help you expand. In fact, I see some of our students on here, which is so great. So, hi, everybody. Now, from there, one of the reasons why we do this webinar, and we do it about once or twice a year, is really just so if you're not able to join one of the courses or the timing is just not right for you, or your exam is maybe in the next few days, we have that quite frequently, that we can give you as many tools as possible to be successful. Now, we don't work for the CMS, we are private education, so I want you to think of us like personal trainers for your brain, or like if you've ever hired an SAT or a college prep course, that's what we do. Now, we've had over 250 students pass the certified exam, which means that we've been able to have a good, clear understanding of how the exam works in the US and abroad in the EU. So we'll cover a little bit of both. And in our courses, we cover both as well. But then the other big thing to go along with that too is that we've been able to make sure that our all of our materials and what we teach here was curated. And we've had so many students pass that we know that these methods work. In fact, Matt was one of my students, and so was Allie. Matt was one of our 10-week prep courses. So I'm also not going to just break down the three pieces of the exam for you because the CMS has a few webinars. They do that kind of stuff too, and they're actually not allowed to tell you a lot because there are a lot of contracts for them. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through each section of the exam and in an hour, try and give you everything that works well for our students. So we're going to give you study tips, blind tasting tips, service tips, anything we can to make sure that you're successful. With that, any questions before we begin? No, not yet. Okay, well, let's get started. Now, I do have a PowerPoint. I know it feels like we're back in school, but it is probably one of the best and most effective ways to kind of just get going here. So, oh, and of course, I have it on the wrong screen. Why? Why would I not? Okay, give me one quick second. All right, so welcome to our webinar. Here we are, dun dun dun, on how to pass and get ready for the Certified Sommelier exam. So I know I said I wasn't going to do a lot of it, but I'm going to give you a quick overview of the three sections. So no matter where you are in the world, this is the only exam, unfortunately, except for a few others like the ISI. It's the only one that is worldwide that really does give a big focus on service. So the three parts of this exam are the theory portion, which in the US it's 45 questions, multiple choice matching, fill in the blanks. Sometimes you have a menu correction. You have 35 minutes to do this, and there is an app called Exemplify that you'll use to be able to go in and do this on the computer. But yes, you still have to do it as part of the in-portion exam. If you're taking the advanced exam, they've actually split that into two separate exams. So you do theory first in one location, and then you travel to a secondary for your service and your tasting. We're not going to talk about that, but we have lots and lots of students in the advanced pathway. So if that's something that you're interested in, please let us know. We have tons of students sitting their exam this year for that. Service in the United States is 16 minutes, and there's 6 rough pre-scenarios that you're going to get. Everything focuses on champagne service. And really, from what we understand, grading is broken into 3 parts. One is your mechanics, how you move and doing the steps of service that they want you to. The other one is going to be your questions, how good you are in tableside theory, answering questions that the proctors ask. But the third one also is hospitality. It's how kind you are, how nice you are as you're going through the whole process, and how hospitable you are. And then this does where you really see the mix of all aspects of this exam come together. You will be asked wine questions, you'll be asked pairing questions, you'll also be asked beer, sake, spirit questions through this process. Now, the blind tasting is where it kind of differs between Europe and the United States. In the US, we have 4 wines, 2 whites, 2 reds done blind. It used to be 30 minutes for 4 wines. Now it's 45 because you actually have to fill out a paper copy of the certified grid and then you have to type it into the Exemplify system after. So it's partial paper, partial digital. And, this is going to be a mix. There's a list of testable varieties the CMS gives, which actually takes a lot of the guesswork out as long as you learn the theory, right? And then learn the process behind tasting. And then for the European exam, you have 2 whites, you have 1 white, 1 red, just 2 wines, and everything is done on paper. And those grids do look a little different. All right, let's get into nuts and bolts of theory. Theory is one of the big ones where students get the most lost. And I know Ali and Matt can both attest to this is during theory, the CMS gives a curriculum guide, but it doesn't go in depth. And even sometimes that's missing things or there's typos or there's misinformation in there, like all documents in the world can have. But knowing how far to go and how much time to give yourself is really the hardest part here. And so one of the biggest things that we do for all of our students that we work with is we make sure that you have a study plan. We organize that study plan based on your life. So the things that are really important to you still are present and we're not putting you into a state of burnout. I've had students cover all the same information in a 10-week study plan, in a 20, and a 6-week study plan. And so we really make sure that this is catered for you, right? I was going to say thank you for perfect. I was going to say we got a little background noise there. The other thing is, how deep do you go? What exactly are you supposed to study? I had a student when I first started who spent a month on Greece when you're maybe going to get like 2 questions on Greece if you're lucky. And then, the other thing we look at is like what to focus on exactly. We have 8 study points we've distilled down that came from one of my mentors that we help students to really hone in on what they need to know per region. And then we're going to talk about styles of learning. So when you go about this, the worst thing you can do is just pick up a book and start reading because you're going to be on a time constraint. And it doesn't matter if your exam, like I said, is scheduled for March or next week, or if you're looking at taking it in 2027. You need to understand what topics you need to cover. So you need to be able to look at each country, break it down into each individual regions, and then know which regions are more important than others. And then from there, you're going to have to know how to take that and schedule it out so you cover all this information. So you're not just reading a book on France and then looking at maps at Italy. So we have students, like I said, the curated study plans that we give all of our students. We use, a basic tool and then we customize it per student is really, really helpful. So I recommend if you're writing a study plan, you start from the date and work backwards. Count your weeks and then understand how many hours you can honestly dedicate per week to studying and then break up topics based on that so that you're giving yourself a guideline of what you need to know and you're giving yourself the timeline. And if you don't finish a topic, that's okay. You can come back to it. But if you're supposed to move on from Loire into the Rhone Valley and you don't, and then all of a sudden, France is bleeding into Italy, and then Italy is bleeding into Germany, and then all of a sudden you haven't even covered South Africa by the time your exam comes, you're only doing yourself a disservice. The other thing is know your depth. This is really important because you need to be able to work as a sommelier. Everything that we teach you and that you need to know for this test is about being able to take it, translate it into a working somm. So why do you need to know the varieties in a bottle of Sancerre Rouge? Well, if somebody wants Pinot Noir, this is a great option. Or if it's on your list or it's on a wine shelf, you need to be able to know what's in that bottle and accurately describe it and sell it to a guest. So everything that you need to know is working knowledge. And even the really dense stuff, like when I was studying for the master's exam, I had to know hectoliters per hectare in the Grand Crus of Burgundy. But there's a translation for it. No guest wants to hear what the hectoliters per hectare are in Grand Crus, but I know that the limited amounts of yield plus the small amount of land that a Grand Cru vineyard is, and then the amount of labor that goes into it equates the price on that bottle. I need to be able to take those factual pieces of information and translate it. You at the certified level are in the translation stage. Now, the other thing I like to tell students too is like there's so much wine information out there that you really should focus in. You should have a very customized tool belt. You don't need $1 million. God knows I've bought so many over the years that are just way, way, way too much. But I know that when I'm studying, I've honed in to be really selective. I really love Guildsom. The website is incredible. They focus on, CMS stuff, NMW stuff. But what's great about it is the study guides here create this meaningful learning. They tell you a story on a region. They create that engagement that you need, which we'll talk about memory in a second. But with that, they're also written by people who are usually on the CMS pathway. So compared to like the World Atlas of Wine or the Oxford Companion, Jancis Robinson is amazing, but she's on that MW scope of knowledge where you need to focus on service, which is CMS scope. And Guildsom, again, if it's written by people who have gone through this pathway, you're more likely to get the right information rather than just a bunch of good wine information that couldn't be tested on. I also highly recommend all of our students get a curated textbook. I've just updated it to include all the producers, vintages, cocktails, anything that our students could need. It's about 400 pages at this point. But it includes our blind tasting method, it includes service, and then it is everything a student or candidate needs to know for the certified exam. So we have our own curated textbooks for our students. We are not selling them because they're in the publishing process, so we can't. But the digital versions are gifts to all of our students who register for any of our courses. And if you don't have that, then Guildsom, again, is just a really great place to start. I actually recommend my students read the Guildsom study guides and then come to our books. They use them in tandem. Also, things like Brainscape as a flashcard study app can be good. We're going to talk about learning styles and different things for that as well, because that's really important. So the first lesson I do with any student is we talk about kind of what we're doing now, study plans, but then we also talk about how learning works and then understanding a learning style, which we're going to get a little bit more in depth in this in a few slides. Your learning style is so, so important because it's going to help you be really efficient with your time and how you memorize knowledge. So when we're going about it, there's a ton of different things that are now available thanks to, AI and tech that we never had before, which makes learning a lot easier. But the first thing that you need to know is that when you're learning something, you need to do two processes. The first is you need to create meaningful learning, which is where you get a connection, a emotional connection to a topic. And reading stories is the best way to do this. This is how when like somebody tells you about their day and then you go to repeat a story to somebody else, you don't necessarily remember the times or the dates, right, or the location, but you know the story. You've made a connection to it and you can repeat it. That is meaningful learning. I like to use the analogy of like, imagine that you are in a forest and you are walking to a plot of land. You clear the land and you start to get everything ready for the foundation. That right there, the foundation is your meaningful learning. Now, when you track out of the woods to go get your supplies and you load up and you go back in, you're going to have that path be very, very faint and difficult to follow. But the more you go down that path, the more defined it gets. And this is how our brains function. when we take in something, if we make an emotional connection to it, it goes back into our hippocampus. So it actually starts in our supracortex and it goes all the way back, right, to just north of your brainstem. And your hippocampus is where our long-term memory is. So you learn something that makes a connection. It goes from our short-term memory and it creates a neural pathway, that path in the woods, right, to that plot of land or hippocampus. Now, you need to keep that little path growing, right? You need to keep that neural pathway strong and use it over and over again. So once you have the foundation or the story, then you can learn your factual information, the data points, the who, what, when, where, how, why, the times, the names, anything that you need, the techniques. And then those will be brick by brick what you take down that neural pathway or down that path in the woods to start building the house, right? That you started the foundation on. You need the foundation of the story to be able to get the hard data, the facts to stick. This is why when you're in college and you're sitting there and you're just like cramming before an exam, when it comes to building on that knowledge later, you don't. You have nothing to work off of because you have not given yourself the time or the ability to really settle it in, to create that long-lasting memory storage. And here's the thing, is like I want you all to pass a test, but it's not about the test, is you all should be really good working professionals. You should be able to have these conversations, to talk about wine, to sell wine, and continually build your knowledge. The test is great, but it's just a mile marker for your career. It's just like getting your bachelor's exam. It's only the start to the rest of the learning that you're going to do the rest of your life, or for the rest of your time that you're interested in wine, which is hopefully the rest of your life. So if you're not a good professional, the test doesn't even matter. So you need to make sure that the stuff you're learning is stuff that sticks with you. And then this will be the foundation for your advanced exam if you decide to go onto other levels. So there's a lot of different ways to do this. Again, one of my favorites is that I'll have students read the Guild Somm study guides, which is so great because then you get the story, and then they'll go to my book, which is laid out what we'll talk about, which is the 8 study points. And then from there, they'll start taking the data that's in my textbook and then building off of it. And you can do this on your own, right? You can build your own study material. It's just, we try to make it as fluid as possible and easy as possible for our students. So the 8 things that we have students study is once you read that story, we break it down into these pieces. And again, my mentor was Tim Gazer. He was amazing and really helped me focus in on my studies for the advanced and the master's exams. And some people have more. Technically, we could call this 10 when we get to higher levels, but you'll see we bunch 2 of them together because they're just not as important at a deeper depth until you get to advanced levels of studies. So the first one is varieties and styles. If you do not know what's in that bottle, you are not going to get anywhere. This is the most important one. So again, if I give you a bottle of Blanquette de Limoux, that's crazy. It's a sparkling wine from the south of France. You're like, I have no idea what this is. A, well, at least we know it's sparkling, right? But B, knowing that the main grape is Mauzac is really important because it doesn't really change the flavor that much for people who aren't discerning, but it helps you understand what's in that bottle to be able to sell it. So varieties and styles is important. So each major region in the world, you need to know this. The best part is that you don't have to go crazy. When we talk about varieties and styles, let's talk about Sancerre again. Sancerre is Sauvignon Blanc and Pinot Noir. Great, there's your varieties. The styles here are dry red, dry white, and because Pinot Noir is here, there's dry rosé. So if it's sparkling, still, fortified, sweet, right, you're going to be in a good place here. Also, too, if there's a red grape in a region, you can assume there's probably going to be a rosé, just like a quick little tip. The next one's is geography, landmarks, and location. And this one is so crazy to me because so many students study the micro. They look at a region and they don't see the overarching picture. One of my favorite questions to ask students, and this is so funny, is, and if anyone knows, put it in the chat. The wine regions of Hungary mainly border what other country? Does anyone have an idea? Say, Matt, did anyone give an answer?
I'm sorry, I didn't realize I was muted. Somebody put in Austria. Matt did.
Okay. So the wine regions, what country did I say? Did I say Austria? I did,
You
right?
said Hungary.
Oh, great. Well, then I did it backwards. Yeah, exactly. So when people think about Austria, is what I should have started with. When you think about Austria, you think about the Germanic language. But what people don't realize is that comes from being under German rule, right? Being conquered and taken over during World War I and World War II. Initially, this was its own country. It was the Austro-Hungarian Empire. So the wine regions of Austria and the wine regions of Hungary border each other. They have more in common with each other than Austria does with Germany. The only thing that keeps them together is the Germanic language and Riesling. And even the Rieslings are made drastically different in Austria. It's the Pannonian Plain. It's hot, it's flat, it's warm, it's fertile. It is totally different than Germany. So if you understand that these two countries are connected, you understand the styles and varieties that they share, which can help you deduce an answer. So if you read a question and you don't know the answer, you stop and you ask yourself, what do I know about this topic? Okay, I know that I'm in Austria, right? I know the red grape varieties are this, this, and this. So what can I assume about this region? And because most of your questions are multiple choice, you can pretty much, guess the correct answer if you have a larger working knowledge of the geography, right? I had a student, not to call anyone out, I just did, but I had a student who didn't know Germany had a coastline because they spent so much time studying the German wine regions that they forgot that as you go farther north, there is a connection between Germany and England and France and Germany because of the coastal region too, right? Not that that's like a big wine question, but you need to know the big stuff. Climate to warren soils is next. And this is what we normally study. This is like in Saint-Emilion, you have clay soils, in the Medoc, you have gravel, right? This is like general stuff. And then here, smaller rivers, things like that are important. Under geography, landmarks, and locations, by the way, is where we put mountains. You should know big mountain ranges. You should know big oceans, big rivers, right, that cut through these regions. And then regional history is really important because, again, this gives you the story. It ties in the connection and tells you why wines in a region are the way that they are. Also, there's always a question on some random white dude from either Europe or like the New World. And sometimes you'll know it and sometimes you're not, but those names will be things you'll study in regional history. So hopefully if it's like, who is Augustus Talassi? You're like, oh yeah, the guy from Buena Vista who like got eaten by a crocodile, right? Long story. But knowing that also makes those deeper, meaningful connections for you so the knowledge sticks better. So regional history is something that ties in, and again, maybe questions. Winemaker preferences and wine laws are two totally different things. You should really know this. Winemaker preferences are historical or common ways that wines are made in a region, while wine laws are actually dictated in each region legally. One of my favorites is Rioja. When the phylloxera pandemic happened and France's winemakers moved from Bordeaux south to Spain, hoping that their vines in Spain wouldn't die, they also cut trade barriers between Spain and France. So these Bordeaux winemakers who ended up in Rioja trying to make wine end up trading with the United States for oak, which is why American oak is prominent there. It's not a law. You can use any type of oak in Rioja. There's no regulation on it. But historically, American oak is tied to Rioja because of the winemakers there needing oak barrels in the trade with the United States. That is a preference. Getting American oak in Rioja is a preference. The laws of Rioja will regulate the varieties, and again, styles will fall under here too with more regulation, and the aging requirements of Rioja fall under wine laws. Now, the next one we group together at the certified level, we break it apart at the advanced, just a heads up. That's villages and vineyards, because sometimes villages are really important. Like you should know the major villages of the Côte de Nuits north to south, Côte de Beaune north to south. And then also in Burgundy, the vineyards are really important. You should know your Grand Cru vineyards in Burgundy. Maybe one or two Premier Crus if you have a lot of work with Burgundy or you sold a lot of the wines in the past. Helpful, but not necessary. Right? But when you're studying vineyards, like the Grand Crus of Burgundy are special for a reason. And then the vineyards and villages go together here. Right? So like Chambertin isn't Gevrey Chambertin, for instance. The next one is producers and vintages. And this is not only going to help your theory, but also help in service because vintages are getting really erratic with climate change. If you don't believe in climate change, look at the crazy heat waves and cold snaps that we've been getting. Here's the thing is when we talk about major producers, we're talking about major producers in major regions. So Champagne, Burgundy, Bordeaux, Rioja, Brunello and Chianti, Barolo. You do not need to know producers for every region. That is way too much. And when we say major producers, we're talking about producers that either command the highest market value, are considered collector items, or wines that changed the game for the region. For instance, this is easy. You should know your first and second growths of Bordeaux. Beyond that, not really, but Bordeaux is like, boom, done. And then when you go to Saint-Emilion, your classification there, your two Gregu Class AAs and a few Bs will suffice. But like when we go to Burgundy, for instance, there's so many producers there. But I think about La Lubise Loire with her biodynamic viticulture. I think about Dominique Lafon. And then I think about Henri Jaillet, who really changed the game into winemaking for Burgundy. That's it. You don't need to go crazy here. I would say if you know 4 or 5 good producers in the big stuff, that'll cover your historical basis. And then that'll help with questions and service. And vintages are the same. My students in our new book, we've got like 10 to 20 years back of vintages, and that's way too much. But that's more for like your own information as a working sommelier. It's a good reference. What you should know in vintages is the amazing stuff, like the ones that are heralded as like best vintage ever. And then the devastation, the fires in Australia, the fires on Howell Mountain in 2020 in Napa, frost or hail that happens at harvest that decimates a crop. You should know the best and the worst. So again, 5 vintages for major regions. If you're starting to study vintages in like um thinking of like smaller regions, like even Western Australia, I would say you're going way too far. That's very advanced stuff. I would say vintages in Barossa, probably, yeah, but anything else, probably too much here. So sometimes these last two will be a good amount of knowledge and sometimes they'll be small amounts. And by the way, feel free to screenshot this. So when you do your own studies, you can break it down. My book is broken down into this for every single major region in the world already. Um, Again, if you're interested in courses, books come with it, which is helpful and just saves you some time. All right. Any questions before we move on? I know that that was a lot. And this is a lot for an hour.
Hey, Ashley, I have a quick question for you.
Yeah, of course.
Well, first off, thanks so much for doing this. Um, have you seen anything about the quote like Som Biz kind of becoming a bigger part of the curriculum?
Yeah, so it always has been. And at the certified level, it's still just 1 or 2 questions. It's usually a costing question, right? Where they'll give you all the info that you need, and then you'll have to cost out. Here's the caveat to this is that they want you to do it their way. And because there's been no like set way for people to do costing, or most of the time it's set by the comptrollers or the accountants of a restaurant or a group or a hotel chain. Costing can be done a little differently. Like the woman I learned how to do costing from in San Francisco, Haley Moore, she's a genius with numbers. And so I'm very thorough with my costing. So sometimes, like I said, the CMS questions will ask you to do things that don't make as much sense, right? But they'll give you everything and they're just trying to see that you can do the numbers. And then they want you to understand the difference between a profit margin and a cost of goods and how they affect and flow with the program. When you get to the advanced level is really when this gets big. But it's always been a part. And honestly, I had people 10 years ago come in and stage for a sommelier position with me and not know how to cost a wine by the glass. And it was like one of the big downfalls. So you don't need to go crazy here, but you just need to know the basic math. And we do that in private sessions. I cover that in the course. We're actually going to do our own, like working sommelier prep course in the future that we're working on. It's probably going to be launched later on this year. That's more focused on like when you get into the job, like realistically, rather than passing an exam. But Austin, if you have a little bit of basic experience, you're going to be just fine. Just fine.
Awesome. Thank you
Yeah.
so much.
Yeah. You're welcome. Any other questions before we move on? Okay. Let's talk about learning styles. So this is something that took me forever to learn for my students. I had helped certified candidates when I was a wine director in Napa pass their exam. And then when the pandemic happened, I lost my job as a wine director here in Charleston, South Carolina, where I moved back to. Um, and I had a lot of students come to me who didn't have support systems for learning and prep for this, which is how this whole business came about and how I met Matt and Allie, and we've built this into what it is today. And one of the things that I learned as we were going through is that I have a biology degree. I have a basic like science background. And even learning for me then was hard. It wasn't until I went to culinary school that I excelled, aced every practical and lab I was giving, aced it, like literally like highest grade in my class. And it took my entire adult life for me to realize, especially when I started failing the master's exam, that there's something different with my brain. Most of us get into hospitality because we don't have a traditional learning style, which learning style is like someone tells you something, you copy it down, you read it, you write it, and you move on. And some people do. This is where we get our amazing English professors from, those that, can go into a history class and read everything and write it down and learn. But most of us get into hospitality because we have a different learning style, which means that our body processes and takes in information differently than others. Now, the VARC quiz is a really simple online quiz I highly recommend you take. I make all of my students do it because then we can curate study plans and study materials for your learning style. For instance, I excelled at my labs, right? Which makes me part kinesthetic, which means I have to do something to learn it, which is why I was so good in culinary school. When I got to the master's exam, I went from doing really, really well at the advanced. Like I took my advanced and got pushed straight into the master's exam 4 months later. Like they're like, just go, you're in, take it. And I failed theory, and theory was my number one thing. Like everyone in Napa thought I'd pass. They were like, you're going to pass. I have a slight learning disability when it comes to oral or listening. When you tell me something, my brain doesn't process through this particular sense the same way it would if I saw it on paper. So when I take a written test, I ace it. But when I hear something, my brain doesn't process the knowledge the same way. So I had to relearn how to learn to be able to take an oral exam like the master's exam. And I want everyone to learn from this because if you're using flashcards and you are a full oral learner, you're never going to learn what you need to learn. It's why you'll study something over and over again and it never sticks and it just goes in one ear and out the other. If you focus on the way that you learn best, and most people in hospitality, like I said, are not reading, writing learners. We learn in different fashions, which is why we like the interactivity. We learn in groups, we learn by looking, we learn by doing, we learn by listening. If you're that kind of person, then a traditional like flashcards like Ian, Cobble, and Psalm, like sitting there all day long, that doesn't work for you. Don't do it. When you understand your learning style, you'll be able to utilize it best. So if you're a listening learner, I actually will tell you to take all the Guild Psalm study guides. You can take the URL, copy it, and I make all my students use a program called Speechify. There's tons of these out there, but this is my favorite for AI text to speech. You pop it in, and then Speechify will read you the Guild Psalm study guide. I have a student who is 100% oral learning. He has failed out of college, failed all these things because he can't do a traditional learning style. Once he started listening to his materials, the world changed for him. He was remembering everything with 3 times the efficiency. I could quiz him and he'd be able to tell me questions that he had studied before in a different style. And maybe you are the read and writing learner, so great. Flashcards, taking notes is going to be good for you. Visual and kinesthetic learners are hard because this tends to be a lot of people who take the hospitality path because this is how we interact with the world. And for us, Matt is also an amazing designer. He's designed these curated maps for us. We've got a book of them coming out that are designed so that you can write on them. You can laminate them, you can color them. They're not really dark and dense and heavy, but you can take them, and I laminate them and write all over them. So if you're a visual learner, you have the maps and you're writing your notes with your pictures, with your maps. Or if you're a kinesthetic learner, you color them and work with them. So you can even take those 8 study points that we talked about, put them on the map. Use the map as your note card. And then this is going to create that visual and kinesthetic connection for you, and you're going to be 10 times more efficient. Now, also, if you're a visual learner, videos are great. That's why a lot of students gravitate towards our 10-week live course because we meet twice a week for an hour and it's lectures. It's a lot more interactive than this because I don't have to get through all of this stuff so fast, right? It's very, very interactive. But, a lot of students who are visual learners like the course because they can be there in class and they can also have that interpersonal connection. They'll work and meet other students. YouTube is great, but unfortunately, there's not a lot of videos that focus on certified, like sommelier service-based knowledge. Wines with Jimmy is great. If you do watch him, though, just remember that's a whole different certification organization, which means the topics, the focal point of the knowledge is a little different. So use this. Take this scale again, take a picture of this, run with it, and then make sure that when you start studying, you're studying efficiently. So for the study plan, just to reiterate, like let's say you have 12 weeks, I would start from today, make a 12-week study plan. And then again, for our students, there's 98 separate things you need to study that we'll break down. And base it on your life. Like if you only have 12 hours a week to study, it's better to learn something small about every region in the world than go really, really deep on half of it and miss the other half. That's the best way to fail, in all honesty. Learn as much as you can in the time that you have so that you don't burn out and you're basing it on your life and your availability. And then figure out your learning style and use it. It will save you so much time. Also, the Speechify, if you score pretty high on oral or audio like learning, use it during your commute. Like instead of sitting at home and reading it, the study guide, listen to it on your way to work. Listen to it while you're doing side work. Listen to it while you're in the carpool lane, right? One of our students on here, she knows she's got two little kids, and we're like, you're going to listen to everything, right? It's going to help so much. And then make sure, like I said, that you're really taking care of yourself and you're not going too deep. Like I know you probably really want to learn something cool and like go down a rabbit hole. I always have a list of my really interesting topics or my rabbit holes that I'll pull off to the side, and I'll either do it when it's not my study time, my designated study time, or I'll do it after my exam. Like I had this book, Volcanic Wines, I wanted to read forever, and I was like, no. It was my treat to myself to read it when I was done and not have to study testable stuff, right? Let's talk about this digital format. So I was going to say, I want to make sure we have enough time for the other two sections. We're doing good. If you're in Europe, your exam is still on paper. Hallelujah. Yes. Yay. If you're taking it with the CMS Americas, you are going to have a digital version, which means that you're going to click on, and unlike SATs, and again, I don't have access to this because we don't work with the CMS. They're their own organization. They also don't tell anybody anything. Very secretive. But what we do know from students is that a question will pop up, you answer it, you hit a next button. Question pops up, hit a next button. What's really great is that I always tell my students to take their test 3 times. I want you to go through and answer what you know, what you honestly know. Anything that takes more than 10 to 15 seconds to answer, flag it. You can actually flag it and go back to questions that you have flagged. And then take the test, go all the way through. Also flag your math questions. Austin, go back to your question. Like your math question, it's only one question. It doesn't even matter if you answer it, if you answer everything else. Who cares, right? It's one question. Is it important in the real world? Yes. You have to know this stuff to be a working sum, but on this test, not worth the time and the effort. So flag those questions, go through, and then honestly evaluate. And I guarantee you'll be like 22, 23 questions answered when you've gone through that test once. And then I want you to go back through again and hit your flagged questions and then take the time to answer it. And then the third time you do it are the questions you absolutely don't know. And then save your math question for last. A lot of times a math question is broken into 3 pieces, like an A, B, and a C. And if you get that, great. I mean, that could be a 3-point question. Again, they never tell us the weight system, but if it's a 3-point question, you only answer A, great, you got 1 out of 3. Who cares? Move on, right? So do your best just to answer what you know and then go back and take your time because you have to get 60% on each individual section of this exam to pass. You just got to get 60%, right? So give yourself the best chance of passing by being really organized with how you take the test. Any questions before we move on? No? Great. I hope that was helpful. We went through a lot of things too that's going to play into service and tasting. So a lot of people get really nervous about service because they might not be in a service position or they might not have worked in a restaurant since college, right? And in fact, my best students at service, no offense to all my students out there, but my best students at service are actually the ones who never work in restaurants. The CMS has a very specific steps of service they want you to follow. I learned them from my mentors in Napa when I was studying for the advanced and the masters. And I've taught my students the way that my mentors taught me. There's always variations that could happen, right? Like Psalms in New York do it different than Psalms in San Francisco, and that's okay. But my students that don't have a service background end up doing really well because they don't have any bad habits to break. So if you're not in service, that is awesome. I have a few videos out there in the world about service, and then we do service demonstrations with all of our course students, the 10-week course students. And then too, if you want any private sessions, we can do mock services digitally. We've developed a system where like I will teach you how to set up your house in a mock service exam scenario, and then you just plop your computer where I can see you and you can practice service. And then in the course, I actually do the service, which to me is still nerve-wracking, even though I've done it a million times. And then in that video, we'll get to interact with students and they show you how to set up your own home so that you can practice on your own and give you the steps of service the way I was taught to follow, which all my students who follow steps of service ace their exam, right? Or ace their service exam. So you need to practice the steps of service the way the CMS wants you to do it. Also, Patrick Okobu has a video floating out there that is amazing. That is him doing it in his own house during the pandemic. If you can find that one, that's a great video too. But again, you have to do it their way. And in fact, when my students fail service, it's usually because they don't care, because they think they've been in service long enough and they're fine. This is not a real restaurant. It is like a weird mix of improv and a job interview. You got to walk in and face a wall. You're going to be given a ton of information right before you walk into the room. And you're not going to know a wine list. This is not your restaurant. This is not you doing the work that you do every day when you actually know your list and you have to know it before you can even work on a restaurant floor. So there's three things, like I said, there's the mechanics, is how you move. There's your knowledge, which can come from basically anything. And then there's the hospitality here. So if your mechanics are perfect, you can pretty much know you're going to be okay in service. And again, though, the mechanics, the movements that you do have to be in the CMS fashion. What I do really love about this, though, is that once you know them, practice them. Like when I was taking my advanced exam, I set up my dining room table and I just walked around it and did nothing but mechanics 5 or 6 times a day for both decanting and sparkling until it was such second nature. It was like riding a bike. If you can get to that point, that's so good because then you can really focus on the guest, your proctor in front of you, and you can focus on the questions they're asking you, and your body will just move. It just knows it. And when you work in a restaurant for a long time, you know how you get through a shift and you don't even remember how it happened? That's what we're looking for. We're looking for just that repetition of motion. From there, let's talk about the service scenarios. I know that the chat's going a little crazy. Matt, is there any questions or anything we should focus on before we move on?
No, just little questions. I got them covered.
Okay, awesome. Perfect. All right. So the main areas of practice, it's not about what you know, it's about doing it the CMS way, right? One of the biggest things I want to tell you beyond the repetition for your mechanics is to find your comfort list. Students think that they have to memorize the French Laundry's wine list to take this test. No, 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 no. I want you to recommend wines that you already know and have a connection with. The same way that we learn our theory is the same way we learn recommendations for wine. If you're recommending a wine that you've never had before or worked with, you're not A, going to remember it because you have no personal connection to it, and B, it's just going to sound hollow because you won't know what it is. So if you are already working in a restaurant, the wines that you're working with will be the wines you recommend during service. And there's a few different styles of questions they could ask. The first one is we're having the, Dover sole and Papillon, right? With, a light butter sauce. Okay, great. You're having whitefish and butter. What would you recommend to go with that? It doesn't matter. If you work in a French restaurant, you could say Muscadet. If you work in a Spanish restaurant, you could say Albarino. If you're Italian, you could say Verdicchio. Anything goes as long as the wine that you're selling pairs with it. And because you don't get a wine list ahead of time to really know and work with, the wines that you already love or work with every day are going to be your options. Now, what if you don't work in a restaurant? That's okay because there's a few tricks here. The first is you're going to have wines that you're blind tasting to practice for your tasting exam. Those wines you've tasted, you know them. So if that question comes up and you don't work in a restaurant, what is the Albarino you bought that you're using for your tasting practice? That's your recommendation. What is your white burgundy? What's your Chablis? So let's say you buy a bottle of Paco and Lola, and that's your recommendation. Great. I want you to know that for your recommendations, the price doesn't matter. They can't judge you on price because a sommelier in Oklahoma is going to have a vastly different market than a sommelier in New York City. So they won't judge your wine as long as it fits the mold. So like for instance, you're having a bacon wrapped steak, right? Great. You want to recommend Cabernet. One person can say Josh Cellars because that's what they sell, and another person can say Harlan Estate. Both answers work because they answer the style and typicity and the pairing that's asked. Now, the other question that you may get is where theory comes in. It's like we drink a lot of I'm trying to think of a producer. Let's go back. We drink a lot of Romier and Rouleau and Lafon, and we really want a white wine in that style. Can you recommend me another producer? And you're like, great, those are three big producers in Burgundy, and you're asking me for a white wine. Okay, I need a white Burgundy. So whatever white Burgundy you're practicing with for tasting, that's your recommendation. Or there's something that you absolutely love, and you're like, again, I go back to like the Loire. I'd be like, I've got the Loire Bourgogne Blanc. It's allocated. It's amazing. It is, from this cool old hippie lady who like never prunes her vines. She like braids them into the trellises, and her wines are completely biodynamic. Great. Sell. Done. That's it. That's your recommendation. Now, beyond that, you're going to get other questions. They're going to ask you questions again, like maybe a vintage question or cocktail, spirits, beer. You're going to get a lot of questions. You do not have to get everyone right at all. In fact, you won't. And if you only answer one or two or three questions right and your mechanics are perfect and your hospitality is great, you're going to pass. Again, it's just 60%. So if you don't know a question, let it roll off your back. Just let it go. But you have to be hospitable about it. So if I get asked a question I don't know the answer, be like, that's an excellent question. I apologize, I don't know the answer, but I'd be happy to find it for you. Now, you don't have to run off and find it and come back. You're in the middle of an exam. That's silly. But that hospitality can be a point, even if the question that you missed isn't. So you have to be kind in the way you say, like, that's an excellent question. Let me find the answer for you. Or, that's a really interesting cocktail. I'm not familiar with it, but I'm happy to ask my bartender. That's it. That's what you do. And then if you're in the middle of like something else and you remember the answer, great, answer it. Pop it in, answer it. Awesome. Good to go. You can still get points for it as long as time is still rolling. But don't lie. Just be honest, be hospitable, and remember, nobody knows everything. In a restaurant, nobody likes a know-it-all, even though Psalms tend to be know-it-alls in most fashions. But like if you don't know something, just be honest about it. Right. So for even the EU and the US, you're going to open a bottle of sparkling wine. This is one of the toughest things to do because obviously, like it's tight, you're dealing with effervescence, they can be explosive and they're hard to pour. Flutes are really hard to pour in, and then when you have something that fizzes, it's hard to pour in general. But you'll usually get a pre-scenario, which is like you'll go in there and they'll ask you to do something like in a real restaurant. Like maybe you walk in and your proctor's like, oh, we want to start with some cocktails. Can you tell me what's in a Manhattan? Or can you tell me about this tequila? And then they'll order a cocktail. You may have to pour something or you may just have to deliver empty glasses. The scenarios are different. And then when you're done with that, you'll move into champagne service. Well, they'll order a bottle of sparkling wine from you, and then you'll have to bring to the table, open it, pour it, all those good things. You could get wines by the glass. Your proctor could order a half glass or a full glass of a wine by the glass, or they could order two different wines by the glass. They could order sake, which means like you'll know if you get a sake scenario because usually when you walk into the room, you'll see your side station and there'll be a bottle of sake. You might get a tokuri and then, the like traditional drinking vessels. And if you get those, then I would offer that or a wine glass. You may also get different sizes of wine glasses to choose from. So let's go back to the wines by the glass. Let's say they order a glass of Cabernet and a glass of Riesling. You're going to have to pick the Bordeaux glass for the Cabernet and the white wine glass for the Riesling. You can also get flights of wine and you could get different levels of pours. You could get like a flight of red, a flight of whites. You could get a white, a red, a rosé. You could get a white, a red, and a dessert wine. These are all varied, right? But be ready for a wine flight, and there'll usually be a theme. The best thing is your proctor or the maitre d', the person outside the room who's organizing everything, will tell you what the wines are. The biggest thing I can tell you about this in any service is that when you walk into that room, if there's something you don't know, you write it down. In fact, as soon as you walk up, have a pad of paper ready and write everything that the maitre d' is saying down. It will all be important. And if it's not, at least you covered your bases. The name of the restaurant, what the theme of the restaurant is, if it's like, Spanish tapas or, like Italian family style, it's all going to be important. And then when you walk into the room, everything your proctor says, write down. Because if they're ordering a flight, they'll give you the wines, right? And if you don't know what the wines are, or you don't know how to spell them, it's okay to stop your proctor and be like, I'm so sorry. Could you please spell that for me? Can you repeat that? Again, this is not a restaurant. And in a real restaurant, you would know these wines already. You would have picked them. You would have set this flight up yourself. So stop and ask them questions and write everything down. And that goes for any of these scenarios that could happen, right? And these are just what we've kind of heard about through the grapevine. It's on Reddit. Students are like, hey, I had to do sake. That was weird, right? So know that these can change, right? You may get a quick decant service, you may get other things. But if you practice these and know how to flow with it, just know that you have 60 minutes. You have to be really good on time and just expect it. Expect there's going to be something in the beginning that'll happen. All right, now on to my personal favorite, which is perfect. We have about 10 minutes to go through this. Any questions on service and how to prep for service?
So I have excuse me, I have a real quick question.
Yeah,
In
Matt.
terms of the mixed drinks, if they were to ask, what's in an old fashioned, how in depth would you go? Like would you include simple syrup in there, or are they just looking for the alcohol and the Angostura bitters? I don't even know if I said that right. But like
Yeah.
how in depth? And I guess main thing, are they looking for garnishes? Are they looking if something has simple syrup in it?
Okay. Here's a great way to answer this. I want you to imagine like a dish. Like if you're talking about a dish, you're not going to give measurements. Don't do that. That's crazy.
Okay.
But things that are really important, like if there's an allergen in there, yes. And you want the main spirit and the mixers that are in there. So for, instance, if you're talking about like Manhattan, you would say, rye whiskey, but bourbon can be used, and then you have vermouth, and bitters, right? Like that's an acceptable answer. If you only know the base, like if they ask you what's in a Mai Tai, and you're like, I know it's light and dark rum, but I'd have to check on the other ingredients, you may still get a point for that.
Okay.
Right. So list what's in there. And again, if anything is an allergen, if something has a nut-based liqueur or simple syrup, right? Like you don't want to feed simple syrup to a diabetic, so I would mention it, but you don't have to go crazy. And garnishes are just too much. Again, unless it's something that is like an allergen, right? Then I would do it. And it will just be classic cocktails. So exactly what you talk about, old fashioned, Manhattan, mojito, Mai Tai, right? All those kind of things.
Yeah, so on the study guide that they send us, it has I think 25 different mixed drinks. You think just picking out the 10 to 15 of the most common ones and really nailing those down?
Okay, let me tell you what I know. I know that they're going to ask you some common classics, which, by the way, that list is not comprehensive. And some of the cocktails on there, like students have never seen or seen an exam, right? So just a heads up, that list is not a good list. Sorry, just being honest. Yes, 10 to 15 of the best classics. And again, things that we just mentioned, like know what a Tom Collins is, know what a Negroni is. They're always going to ask you what I call stump the chump cocktails too, which are like old school cocktails that like only your grandma would order with this name. Like for instance, my mother loved a Cuba Libre. Anybody know what's in a Cuba Libre? Anyone?
Rum
Matt
and
knows.
Coke.
Yeah,
Rum, Coke,
Rum.
and lime.
Yep.
not wine.
No,
Somebody,
no, she's lime. She said lime.
Lime.
oh, yeah. What's the base?
Dark
Rum.
rum.
Rum. Yeah, it's a rum and Coke. It's literally a rum and Coke, and it's called a Cuba Libre. Go, Jessica. Great. Yeah, those are questions that they could ask. They could ask you what's in a pink lady, and you're like, I don't freaking know. Guess what? You're not supposed to know. The stump the chump questions are there just as like they're literally a stump the chump question. If you don't know it, just say, that's an interesting question. I'm happy to ask my bartender and walk away. You're not going to get every answer right. In fact, I had one student who was a great bar manager in DC. And she did answer her questions right to the point where her proctor asked her way more questions than I would think is possible. Because again, they have grading sheets, they have like things to check off to ask you. He could not get her to say, I don't know, to get that hospitality point. This is how we know the hospitality points exist. So he kept asking her cocktail questions and she knew it all.
They could
It's
also ask you the cocktails in the reverse order. So I had this on my exam where they were like, we were at the bar earlier and we had a drink. It had this, this, and this in it. Do you happen to know what the name of it was? And for me, they gave me the ingredients to a Cosmo, and they were looking for a cosmopolitan as the answer, and that's what I had to give them.
yeah, awesome. I love that. That's something to be aware of too. And again, who cares if you don't get it right? It's not the end of the world. Don't freak out. If you know it, yay. And guess what? Some of you are going to be great in sake and beer, and some of you are great in cocktails. And we know that they have different questions. The exam changes roughly every 3 months. That's why you have to wait 90 days to sit an exam once you fail it, right? To go back. But then each proctor in service has different questions. I've had students come out and being like, we all got different questions. So you never know if you'll be the lucky one that gets a topic you know, or you are unlucky and get something you don't know. It's not going to make or break you. Does that make sense for everyone? I don't have any faces, but yeah. Okay. So the other good thing about what we're learning, and I love that some of our students are on this call because you all probably already know this. Blind tasting is science-based, but the way it's taught is not taught by scientists, which means that it's hard for people to understand. It took me forever to know why I was calling specific things in glasses of wine, and I did when I was studying start parroting other people for a style of wine when it was in the glass. Wines themselves have genetic markers. Great varieties have genetic markers that make them highly identifiable and give them the different flavor profiles that they have from each other. When I started working with students, I couldn't understand why students weren't getting specific wines because I had, unbeknownst to myself even, developed a process of tasting where I looked for these genetic markers in each variety, and that's how I became such a great blind taster. When I really started understanding the difference between the way I thought about it and they thought about it, I created the How to Drink Wine Tasting Method, which is something we teach to all of our students. And we start with structure in this method, which is easily transferable, by the way, from our How to Drink Wine grids to like CMS or even WSAT or other wine organizations. But structure doesn't lie. Again, structure is a genetic indicator of a grape variety. Riesling will never not be high acid. If it's lower than high acid, it's because it's like grown in Brazil, right? In a super hot climate. Grape varieties have a tendency to always stay the same structure-wise, and there's still a range in them. Pinot Noir can be medium to medium plus tannin, but it will never be as high as Nebbiolo, and it will never not have tannin. It will never be low. When you understand the science behind grapes, and this is study, you have to study each variety to be able to be a good blind taster. And this is also where there's a gap in the knowledge. The way that I was learning from MSs is like I wasn't taught that each grape variety has things that you need to know, and you need to study the grape before you blind taste. From there, we move into those key indicators. These are either winemaking techniques or they are genetic markers that are considered as part of like what makes a grape variety classic at these testable levels. So we recommend, and I've got so many videos on YouTube and my Instagram about this, and we just launched an on-demand blind tasting course that breaks all this down, like so you can do it on your own time. You don't have to schedule anything. You don't have to make a class time. You just do it at your own pace. But tasting is really important because everything on the certified grid, and even in the European certified grid, has a rhyme or reason. It has a chemical signature to it that you need to be able to identify. For instance, the idea of iodine in leather is not just the smell of leather, which you could say on any grape variety if you really wanted to, that's a red grape. It is actually looking for Brettanomyces cerevisiae or Brettanomyces bruxellensis, which are bacterial chains that cause the like earthy, composty animal nature of wines from France. You need to know that all of your non-fruit, these are layman's, they're simple terms for chemical signatures in these grape varieties. And we teach you what to look for so you know how to fill out your grid, but also you know that if you find certain things in certain wines, it'll either take you to a specific region or it'll take you to a specific variety. For instance, the term pyrazines is a family of chemical components that are found in detectable thresholds in the Cabernet family, which means that all grapes will have some sort of pyrazines floating around in there, but it's strong enough in Sauvignon Blanc, Cabernet Sauvignon, Merlot, and Malbec and Cab Franc that if you smell them, there's no other grape variety it can be. You are only in that family. We teach you how to go directly to that family. Now, the other thing about this is that at the certified level, Europe is a little bigger, but still, we talk about classic wines from classic regions. These are varieties that have like a high level of trade in the world, right? They're varieties and regions that you'll find in almost any wine list or any wine store, and they have a stream of identifiability. They have a stream of similar attributes that can group them together. For instance, Albarino is medium plus acid, medium to medium plus alcohol, maybe some phenolic bitterness, and that's a whole nother story. But then there is this idea of minerality, no oak, and riper terpenes, which means it's slightly floral and can have these like peach and nectarine notes. And for anything that they use to test on will follow these kind of genetic markers so that when you buy Albarino, this is what you're expecting to get. So classic wines from classic regions are chosen A because they are really prominent in the wine world, right? They're really prominent and able to be found in the US or Europe. And then two, they have these classic identifiable characteristics. Now, when you're tasting, I want you to know that some people are really great tasters automatically, and for some people, it's a lot harder. This is just like learning to play an instrument. We're learning and using different senses that we've never used before, which means that when you pick up a wine and you taste it, it's like picking up a violin and trying to play a note for the first time. Someone may be really adept at it and learn it very quickly and be able to play in a symphony orchestra when they're like 15, while others may need to pick up their instrument and practice for a long time. It may be put in more effort, but that doesn't mean that they both still can't play for the same symphony orchestra. So you need to use repetition to set what your acid, alcohol, tannin, and residual sugar scales are, and that is just something that is practice. All of our students also get these great profiles that we're printing in our book that kind of tell you the range of what each grape variety is and what you should be looking for. But if you're interested, like I said, for blind tasting, you really just need to know what the grapes are to be able to put it on the sheet. And then for us, we use sweetness, acid, alcohol, tannin, and then below, these are what we call the key indicators: oak, pyrazines, rotundone, terpenes, lees, Brett, and volatile acidity. These are all chemical compounds in the grape varieties or winemaking techniques, oak, right, that help you identify the grape really quickly and efficiently. Now, these are your testable grapes. This comes from the CMS. So if you're in the US, hallelujah, this is what you should be buying and practicing with. So it really does narrow it down quite a bit. Now, for these grids, again, I mentioned in the beginning that tasting is now done digitally. So you have 45 minutes. I recommend that you do your paper grids for all four wines before you even touch the computer. Because if something happens to that computer system, if it cuts off early or it shuts down or it doesn't save your answers because technology goes wrong, your paper grids you need to do fully because then they'll have something to grade you with. They'll have something to make sure that you've done the test. I had a student whose exam cut off early, and when that happened, he didn't know what to do. So he handed his paper copies into his proctors, told him what happened. He's like, you need to grade my paper copies. And guess what they did? And he passed, right? So know that this is an option. Now, when we do structure in the How to Drink Wine method, we start, or when we fill out these grids, we start down here in structure, right? Easy peasy. And then we jump up to non-fruit. And again, key indicators are kind of thrown throughout here. And then we finish with fruit. And the reason why we do that is because every white wine in the world you can say has an apple and a pear and citrus to it. In fact, basic descriptors like green apple, lemon, pear are everything. That is Chardonnay, that's Albarino, that could be Sauvignon Blanc, that could be Pinot Grigio, right? Fruit is helpful to take apart minute differences in varieties, but your fruit will not take you to a specific variety. The other thing I will tell you is when you're done filling out your grids, make sure you stop and read it back. When a lot of students use one thing, one key indicator to take a grape variety home, that's usually when they fail. Like, I smell roses, it has to be Nebbiolo. Did you look at your structure? Is it high tannin? Is it high acid? No, then it's not Nebbiolo. So make sure you use the sum of the parts. You need to read back this grid completely before you make a final call. Now, I know that we're out of time, so I'm just going to move on from this. But again, we've got lots of videos up. We have a blind tasting course on demand. We also have the course, obviously. And we're doing a boot camp. We're doing a live 4-week session. So it's like 2 hours a week of like blind tastings, and we send you kits. We have partnered with Master of the World, so we have all these curated kits. So I know this is a lot. And again, no matter if you join the course or not, I hope at least this was helpful. But we are here because on March 23rd, I will be gone for a few weeks, which is why we're doing this webinar now. But March 23rd, we're starting our next 10-week certified course. We already have 4 of the 16 slots filled. We only take 16 students, and all students join. It's on Mondays and Thursdays from 1 to 2 p.m. live sessions. We also have tons of office hours and additional blind tasting courses and meeting set. You also get a one-on-one to do 4 wines with me together. And so even if you can't make a lot of the times or you're out of town for part of this, everything is recorded. You get full access to the course for an entire year. So you can go back and watch all the recordings, right? So you can take this even if you're not in class. I've had students in Taiwan and Dubai who just watched the recordings, and it worked really well for them. But the biggest thing about this is when you're studying is you need a community. Having other people who are studying with you that you can talk with, work things through is amazing. Also for this, we started a WhatsApp group, and I still get messages from 2 years ago. The groups study together. They are still working together. I will teach you how to blind taste each other digitally as well, so you can really start to work and hone in with your group. I think Matt's class, actually, you had like 10 people sit the same exam together, which was where was it? It was in like North Carolina or Nashville. And a lot of times students will stay together and study together and sit their exams together. So you even have that support group when it comes to it. You get all of our textbooks, you get a dozen other study materials, you get Matt's cool maps to work with. And also, if you sign up and mention this webinar, you're going to get a free one-on-one with me, which is a $100 value. So it's basically a free private coaching session you can use whenever. Again, it does start March 23rd. We already have 4 spots filled, and we haven't even started advertising. They're gone. So I really, really recommend it. Again, we keep it small. And if this doesn't fit your schedule, we have a blind tasting boot camp, like I said, begin in April. That's 4 live sessions. We send you 12 wines from Master of the World curated by us. Also, the course has the option of purchasing an additional wine kit from Master of the World. They give you a $40 discount, free shipping. And if not, I'm going to teach you how to rebottle wines. So any of our courses that you might be interested in, let us know. We are also doing private coaching sessions. So if you just need like 1 or 2 hours of help, or you really want some personalized attention, we have that option. So I hope, like I said, that this was helpful for everyone. And I'm here for any questions you have beyond that.
I
Ashley,
would love
there's
to.
Oh,
oh,
Okay.
go
I'm
ahead,
sorry.
Matt.
Ashley, there's a question in the chat. I was saying that the list that the CMS put out might be slightly different than what you showed. Could you just check that out and speak to that real quick if you know anything?
Yeah, so on that list, the grape varieties list, I mean, nothing is really different on there. Except for Cabernet Franc is now testable. It's the old copy, but those grape varieties should all be up to date. So they did take off varieties. So Australian Riesling's out, Alsace Riesling is out, California Sauvignon Blanc is out. But beyond that, that list is updated. Just the Cabernet Franc is now. Right.
Yeah, and so as the person who put it that chat, what my comment was specifically about is so the screenshot you showed had old bullet points. They mentioned in one of the CMS webinars that they updated as slashes so that when you're filling out the sheet for the blind tasting, if you were to put, say for like a US Chardonnay California, if you put Napa Sonoma or what's the last one, Central, that would all be acceptable.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, and that is kind of like splitting hairs. Thank you. Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about with that. So that's just on the PowerPoint, right? That was just a photocopy that I had. When you actually get into the exam, when you're picking wines yourself to blind taste, they actually will do like you can have Santa Barbara, Sonoma, or Napa Chardonnay. Honestly, though, Mateo, they're going to give you like Carneros Chardonnay. They're going to give you Malo, oak, right? It's going to be medium acid. It's going to have like, a big, full, richer body to it. So like I would just buy one good bottle of Carnero Chardonnay and call it a day. They say that these are all options, but the ones that they give you will be highly identifiable, hopefully, right? Again, there's a lot of human error here. But you don't have to buy a bottle from every region. You can just buy one good bottle of California Chardonnay and practice with it and be just fine.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, I hope that helps. And Shiri, you had a question too?
Yes, thank you. I'm from Europe and I'm very interested in the course, but I already signed up for the exam on May, like late May, like May 17 in London. So I'm thinking because of the date, uh, if I should take the course, or maybe it's not. it's not worth it if I'm like 1 month before I have to take the test.
So the course ends in May, which is perfect timing actually. And I've had lots of students take the course and are only in the course for about 8 weeks, and then they sit their exam. If this is you, still take the course. This is going to be like the best boot camp right before you sit to get you ready, especially for the London exam. I have a student who's going to be sitting with you. Um, and then anything you may miss, like the last week is all review. It is exam review, it's theory review, right? So if you end up missing that last week, I'll actually just send you recordings from a previous course so you can still watch them. But you'll still get to be there for the service, the theory breakdowns, everything. So again, because you would only, I think, miss a week, right, of the course itself, I would do it. I had a student who actually missed 3 weeks, the last 3 weeks of her course. She was a chef from Texas, and still thought that it was completely worth it. And also too, because you're sitting in Europe, it would be nice to have the ability to share both sides. So I'll make sure that we focus a lot on the European style of exam for you. That way you're ready for that as well.
Okay, amazing. Thank you very much.
Yeah, you're so welcome. What else? I'm here for anything y'all need.
So on the tasting grid, on the bottom under conclusion, all the samples that are given, you see like grape variety one, grape variety two. When we take the test, will it, I'm assuming it'll
Mm.
say like Merlot, Pinot Noir, Cabernet, and you check the appropriate one. I just, you know, with
Yeah.
the sample.
Such a good question, Matt. So here's what happens is your paper copy used to have 6 varieties listed when it was just the paper copy. Now it's blank. But when you get to your computer copy, it will give you 6 varieties to choose from. And this is where it gets a little hairy. So let's say you've done all the work and you think you've got Merlot in your glass. I would still write it on your paper copy. And then when you go to your physical copy and you go, because you have to type in and click a button, type in and click a button. It's not like a Adobe document you can fill out head to toe and see it. I would write down what you think it is. And then when you go to your digital copy and you get to that last section where it lists 6 varieties, let's say Merlot's not an option. You have to pick the next best grape variety. There's a method I call the horse race that I teach my students where like all the grape varieties come out the gate. Red wines are really cool because color, people never think about color, but genetically, grapes are prone to have darker color, higher density of color, or lower density of color. So if you have a higher density of color saturation, then you automatically have certain grapes in the lead. And then each thing you look through will take you a little closer and closer until you end up with a small amount of grape varieties to choose from. If you're there, let's say again, you have Malbec, Merlot, Cab because you're getting pyrazines and Merlot's not an answer, then just pick Cab or Malbec if it's there. And then rearrange your notes just to justify your answer to be like, okay, well, maybe the tannins were higher than I thought. I'm going to go with Cabernet instead. So it's a little tricky, but you and I will go through this. Like, we'll make sure that when you get there, like, you can at least make the best guess you can. And then if it's not exact for the digital copy, then we'll make sure you know how to pick the next best option for that. Does that make sense?
It does, yeah. And I have one other question that kind of pertains to this, but I don't know. I've been looking at the advanced and master som tasting grid, and they go through brightness. When I try to dig into what brightness is visually, um, it talks about reflection, and I can't get anything more in depth because when you Google brightness and wine, it wants to go for like the structure on the palette. Can you just give like a 15-20 second like overview of brightness since I have you on here? Is that like as the light's shining through your glass, what you see reflected behind it?
You kind of just gave yourself the answer. And
Okay.
again, brightness, by the way, doesn't even matter until you get to advanced and master's levels. And even then, it's one freaking point. It doesn't matter. But brightness is how much light reflects through the wine. So, for instance, a wine that is an orange wine or unfiltered or unfined will look turbid or kind of hazy. So, it's not bright. Where if a wine reflects light off of it, that is like a star bright wine. For red wines too, part of the density of color is part of the brightness or the reflectivity of it. So like a Pinot Noir will have a higher level of brightness than a Cabernet will. But again, don't even worry too much about that. I would rather have you focus on the density of color if it is a thin-skinned or light density of color grape, or if it is a thick or hard to see through grape, because again, genetically, that is so important for varieties.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Hey, Ashley, I have a question.
Of course.
Hey, so I was looking through the what they were gonna go over with in the exam. Beer is one of the subjects on there. I did buy one of the books for the wines. Beer I have not yet. But my question is, how would you pair beer and food together?
As far as I know, there's never been a beer and food pairing question ever.
Okay,
And also don't buy a book. Just read the Guild Som study guide on it. It's really great and it's going to give you what you need to know. If you do get that, then I really like to think about the density of food or the seasoning of food, right? You don't want a beer that's higher in alcohol, like an Abbey Ale, with something that is extremely spicy. If it's a lightly and delicate flavored food, like let's go back to that Dover Sole and Papillon, then I would pick a lighter style beer like a Pilsner that has just enough hops to cut through the butter, or a lighter style beer like even just like a light lager. You could say like Kronenberg or Peroni if you wanted to, like those kind of things. So the heavier the food, the heavier the beer. But again, I'd never heard of that happening. And if you really want to get into food and beer pairing, my favorite person for beer ever is Garrett Oliver. He was the brewmaster at Brooklyn Brewery forever. He's got some great books out. But again, don't waste your time if you're sitting in an exam. If you want to do it for fun, do it. It's great. I use beer in a lot of my tasting menus. But for this, if you are on a time crunch, just don't waste the time.
awesome. Second question. How would you describe phenolic bitterness in whites?
Yeah, phenolic bitterness is really hard. Phenolic bitterness is usually caused by two things. It is either caused by high terpenes or high floral compounds. So again, chemical compounds in grapes that make wines really floral have a natural bitter tendency. But also phenolic bitterness is caused by heavy chemical compounds in the grape skins. Usually this is like other people refer to it as white wine tannin. So the gris grapes, the grapes that actually look like a more purplish color at harvest, Pinot Grigio, Gewürztraminer, Muscat, tend to have phenolic bitterness. The tie-in is those grape varieties also tend to have higher floral aromatics, unless you're like basic Italian Pinot Grigio. But when you're really looking at it, phenolic bitterness is a textural sensation. It is white wine tannin. So if you want to see white wine tannin, go grab a glass of orange wine. And then if you want to see white wine tannin that's just in an everyday wine, Gewürztraminer is really good. It is not bitter. It's not like Sauvignon Blanc bitter. Those are two different things. It's not like green grassy bitter. It
Mhm.
is literally like top of the roof of your mouth textural component that is again found in those grape skins. And phenolic bitterness is something that like we don't talk about a lot because really your only phenolically bitter grapes at the same as US level is Gewürztraminer, maybe Albarino, maybe Pinot Grigio, right?
Okay, gotcha. Thank you, Ashley.
You're so
Actually,
welcome.
somebody asked in the chat, is Beyond the Label still a good book to study for level one SOM exam?
Too much, way too much for level one. So much. It's a really great book. I recommend it for MW or WRCT students. And I recommend it for my students, believe it or not, who are chefs. And it's all about the way that you learn. Um, it's a good book. It's so much. It's really for those that are going into like pretty advanced tasting. The level one doesn't even have a tasting portion to it unless you're in Europe. And then no tasting portion. You just have a service portion, like opening a bottle of white wine. Um, yeah, if you are, so the students I've had who are professional chefs tend to focus on texture of food, right? And they have this whole other palate sensory mechanism that they're using. Beyond Flavor is perfect for those students. But yeah, I would say it's just too much for the intro, even for the certified. It's more that like fun, like let's really dive deep, but it's still, I think, a little too much. Like if you're taking your advanced exam, it's a good book to read. Right. What else? Actually, sorry, I think again, this is why I am not an oral learner. Behind the label, for some reason I thought you said Beyond Flavor, which is a great book too, if anybody has read it. Not the same book. Not the same book. Behind the Label, I am not actually as familiar with, but I would say if you're going beyond the CMS intro book or Guild Sum, you're going too far. The other books that they recommend, I want you to know are good to help you get a well-rounded experience, but sometimes they might go a little in depth or not have material that is as important. So, for whoever asked that question, sorry, I can't believe I just thought you said Beyond Flavor. I can look into it. Let me see what research I can do. And then if you have it, great, use it. If not, I wouldn't worry about purchasing it. All right, what are the questions? No more burning questions. You can ask me anything. Totally fine. There's no silly questions as long as I can understand what you're asking.
I have one more question.
Yeah.
So you talked a lot about grapes being, especially tasting it being more scientific and it's not being taught by scientists. So if someone who is with more of a science background, is there any other research you know to help gear it more towards sciencey because I enjoy this because I'm better with that science instead of just reading and tasting yeah.
Yeah, my blind tasting course, 100%. So
Okay.
whether it's the on-demand one or it's the live one we're going to do, the boot camp, which is like 4 live sessions on like 4 Sundays in a row, I will break down the science for you. Or if you're interested in like one-on-one sessions, I won't be taking private students until March. But yeah, no, like we built these courses because like there's factual data as to why grapes taste the way they taste, and nobody else is teaching it except for Jamie Good, and it blows my mind. So if that's where you lean to, like me, like any of our courses that have a blind tasting component, you will freaking love. I know Matt can probably attest to that. Like I teach a whole different style of tasting and it is so accurate and so cool. And then you can take it and expand to it later on, right?
I put the link to in the chat. It'll take you to our Thinkific page, which has all of the courses bundles. You can bundle courses together, save some money that way. So you can click that link. It'll take you to anything you're interested in, whether it's the cohort or the blind tasting course. It's all
Yeah.
right there.
Yeah, and then to go along with that too, the bundles are great. If the live course doesn't work for you, we took last summer's course and put it on demand, which means you can just like watch last summer's course. It was such a cool dynamic group of people, really interactive. They asked amazing questions. You could just take that and then bundle that with the on-demand tasting course together. And then, as Matt said, save a lot of money and then do it on your own time if you feel like the timeline doesn't work for you too. So, but Mateo, like you love the tasting courses. I'm so excited for them. By the way, the blind tasting course, the on-demand one, says it's still pre-order. I'm doing my last 3 videos for it today, and then it is launched. So,
Actually, a question came up in the chat. It says, I have been digging deep into the introductory 2019 workbook and have not seen any updates. Is there still a big emphasis on New World versus Old World for this generation of CMS certified?
they actually don't use those terms anymore because winemaking is changing and people are starting to use more like advanced techniques. And with climate change, climate itself is kind of throwing things for a loop. So they actually don't talk about old world and new world anymore, but we still do because it's more about the progression of things and the laws and the history of them. And then Matt too, I forgot if you signed up for the intro or not yet, but they'll send you a digital copy of the new workbook that they have. Um, where it'll have those updates, but we're still going to talk about it in my courses because there is a historical factor here that helps you understand the regions a little bit more. Yeah. Yeah. Yaskar, you are so welcome. I mean, there's so many of you on. Does anyone else have any other questions? Oh, Allie, I just saw you. Do you want to say hello? Maybe. He's like, ah.
Hello. I've had a long day, so I'm just staying quiet, all right? So that's all.
Ali is our other partner, and if anyone has questions on the CMS Europe, Sherry, I was thinking about you. He passed his exam in Athens, so we do have both two certifieds from the US and from Europe, and then advanced some here to help you out. So if you guys need anything too, like you can ask any of the three of us. We're always here for you guys. So, all right. Any other questions? Thomas, you're so welcome. We're going to be sending copies of this recording. If you all want the PowerPoint, I can include that too, and some links and stuff. Like I said, even if you guys don't sign up for the courses, I hope that this was a good boot camp for you. Just helps you understand the process a little bit more. And keep an eye out for those blind tasting courses. I'm so excited for them. They have been such a labor of love. Literally, I'm getting ready to taste right after this with my little mini bottles. But yeah, so we're so happy that you all were here. Like I said, I hope this was helpful. And any last questions? Anything pop up? Okay. All right, everyone. Matt, thank you so much for handling the chat. It was so good to have you all here. And I know I will see some of you all in the future. And either way, good luck with all of your studies. And we are always here if you need us. So, all right. Have a wonderful day, everyone. We'll see you next time.
Bye. Thanks, everybody.